there, it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. Today is another really fun technique that I haven't done too much of and I don't think I have a video on it yet. This technique is called plastic bag printing, and I just have a little Ziploc bag here, and this is one that I've used, but it's going to be absolutely fine because all we need is the outside of it. So make sure it's sealed up the top, and I just want the outside. You could use anything that is probably non-porous for this, anything kind of plastic bag. It doesn't have to be a little Ziploc bag. And then I have my little non-stick mat here just to protect my work surface, and then just a piece of regular cardstock. Now for this, I'm going to use the heavy body black acrylic paint. I have also used some black gesso. Any black paint is going to work. In fact, basically any paints are going to work, but it's just that I'm going for black for today. But you could of course do this in colors, and you'll see in just a minute there's a whole range of options. So I have a nice little paintbrush. It has a rounded end to it, which we are going to use as well. And then of course the paintbrush end, which is just a smaller, finer paintbrush. Any is going to work. And I'm going to draw a little leaf sort of design on here, just very roughly and pretty quickly. This is in real time, so this is exactly how it was. And I'm just not perfect, just a nice little rough leaf design. And then once I have put the paint on, the acrylic paint on, I'm going to turn my paintbrush upside down, and I want to use one that has a kind of nice rounded edge so I don't scratch the actual plastic. And I'm just going to run this around the design that I created, and this just gives it a whole lot of texture, a whole lot of lines. And I think this part of the process is what makes me feel like it doesn't have to be perfect. So I've gone over all of the black paint with the back side of my paintbrush, and then I'm going to pop this down onto my pattern and then gently push. You don't want to have too much paint on your pattern, on your design that you draw. Otherwise, when you push, you're going to squish the paint around. So it's important that you don't load up your paintbrush. And now I want to do a similar design again. So I'm actually just going to paint over top again, using not too much paint, and just go over top of the same pattern that I had before. Now, so there is a kind of a fine line between not too much paint, but not too little paint, because you don't want it to dry before it even gets to your piece of paper. So just do the same process all over again, and then I'm just going to kind of make a background here, I guess. Now, as I said earlier, you could do this in any colors at all. You could do this over a background. Even if you had a dark background with lots of dark navy blues and blacks and things, you could do this with white paint and then pop that down as well. I mean, so many options. Then I decided to fill it in with some little squiggles, little squirrels, and then I'm going to do the same trick with the back of my paintbrush and then tap these down lightly so that this fills in the background just a little bit. So there are obviously lots of different ways to do printing and printmaking. So this is just a really fun one, and honestly I did this with the kids as well and they really enjoyed it. But I thought that I would make a video out of it so that I could show you how I would finish these cards off as doing cards for me rather than the kids' cards. So I'm just going to finish off creating this background here. Now I do quite like these swirls. It's just a really easy, nice kind of filler for the background. Now, I will say that this technique is probably not for the perfectionist, or if you are a perfectionist, then this would really challenge your being, because this doesn't always work out perfect. I think you can't exactly predict how the paint kind of goes on, and it just depends where you've got thick bits or thin bits or blobs, or so it really isn't something that you can super predict. But I had a whole lot of fun doing it, and it is a little bit of a challenge for me because, as I said, you kind of let go of some of that perfectionism and getting things just the way you want it, and it just is what it is. It's how it prints is what you end up with. So I decided to try a different kind of flower, I guess, completely made up. This is just my kind of flower, nothing in particular, and I just thought I would do all of these little petals, and then I would run the back of my paintbrush over them, and then I'm going to pop this down. I kind of wanted to make this a whole picture, but I felt like the acrylic paint, because it's so thin on here, is going to dry a little bit and I kind of don't get as good a print. So I thought I could do this in a couple of stages to go on my little piece of paper here. Now I'm not using any type of watercolor paper or heavy cardstock or anything like that. I use the Frenchville 110 pound paper from Spotlight here in New Zealand, and there is, I think it's about 300 or So GSM, it's kind of a heavy-ish weight cardstock, and I use this for my card bases and my card fronts. I just cut it up all up on my own, and I make my own card bases and things out of that, and it seems to work really well. I love this for ink blending. I'm loving it for watercoloring, very light watercoloring and things like this, and I really like it for alcohol markers. So I've been really enjoying this, and this has become my go-to cardstock that I use. Now here I thought I would just pop the stem on, and then I want one little leaf coming off the side, so I'm just going to kind of draw it separately, very basic, and then just kind of the outside shapes of it, and then do the same thing with the back of my paintbrush, and then I am all done with this one. And as I said, it's kind of after this dries, and it doesn't take very long to dry at all because it is such a thin layer of acrylic paint, that I'm able to take these on and start decorating them. Now obviously, again, you can use so many different mediums that you wanted to decorate these with. You could use some watercolor pencils and do some watercoloring that way. You could use more acrylic paints. You could water them down a little bit if you wanted to have a little less bright and a little less saturated paint. You could use your inks. You could use actually anything. You could use your alcohol markers if you wanted to. The acrylic paint is obviously not going to move at all, so it's a really good medium to be able to work with. I decided to do another print here that was similar to the first one because I really liked how that turned out, except for I covered this whole one in pretty much the same pattern all over. As I said, this is not for the perfectionist because you will get kind of lighter bits and darker bits, and really it's a little bit trial and error, but it is a really fun technique, and it doesn't take too many supplies or too much skill at all. I found this really easy, and in the past when I've done this with my classes, and that was with primary school age children, then they picked this up really easily, and this was a really fun technique for them as well. So here are 3 of the prints that I made. Now just like this, I think they probably don't look like too much, and I guess maybe you're a little bit worried at this point, but I'm going to whiz through a couple of different ways that I coloured these in. So I have some Peacock feathers and some Spun Sugar Distress Oxide inks. As you'll know if you follow my channel, I love my Distress Oxide inks, and they are extremely versatile, so I'm going to use them in kind of a really loose kind of watercolouring way today. I'm going to water these down so that they're not super bright. So I have a water brush that I'm going to use today. This is the medium one from Altenew, but even just a paintbrush dipped in some water is going to work just as well as this, and I am just going to really water that down. I don't want the color to be too intense for this, so just using a little bit. And that is one thing I really do like, is that you can water these down and there's still going to be color there. They don't lose their color. You can add lots of water and tone them down just a little bit. And then I thought I would do the swirls in the background using the pink. The Spun Sugar is a really light color anyway, so I didn't have to be quite so careful with that one. And then I actually ended up, one of my camera batteries has been playing tricks on me, and I think it might be on its last legs because it keeps shutting down on me. So I did lose a bit of footage from this video for the next one that I painted, but I have the very end of it so that you can just see how it ended up. But for the next one, I decided to use my Altenew metallic watercolors that I got for Christmas recently, and I thought that would be really nice to add in a little bit of gold sparkle and gold shine. So I'm going to quickly show you this one. I did decide to add a few little splatters since I had that little bit of ink left over there. I always pretty much just use an acrylic block to be my little palette, my little non-stick palette. I find that really easy to work off. And then I did decide to take off some of the splatters from those little background pink circles. That's why I just mopped up those. So here is when I'm all finished. I used similar colors. I went for a gold and that kind of turquoisey blue color, and I did a very similar thing and I splattered the gold for that one. So this is when it's dry and it has this gorgeous sheen to it. It's really hard to kind of see on camera, the metallic shine, but very light and just kind of delicate. And then here is the first one that I did once it's all dry, with the kind of turquoise color and pink, the really light pink. So now to turn this into a card, I have some Lawn Fawn vellum here. This is my favorite vellum and the only one that I choose to use now because it is very versatile. It's a really nice heavy weight. I'm able to heat emboss on it, so when I add my heat gun to it, it's not going to melt, which is important. Then I will take a Hero Arts background stamp. This is a gorgeous print one, and I must admit this is one that I really love having in my stash. This one I think is maybe still available. I will link to all of the supplies in the description box below this video in case you're interested in checking them out. So once I have added some VersaMark sticky embossing ink, I'm going to lay my vellum down there on the stamp, and I'm taking the vellum to the stamp just because I find that easier to position everything, and then pop a scrap piece of paper on top so that I can make sure I rub over it nice and evenly. And then I'm going to add some white super fine embossing powder to this one, and then that way I will have this gorgeous fine print left on here. This kind of reminds me of like a book page but on vellum, and I really like that. Just adds that little bit more to the vellum. If you didn't want to do some heat embossing like this, then I would do some embossing folder embossing, and that would give a really nice fine background to it as well. But I do love this gorgeous little script here. It's pretty hard to end up reading it, but it just looks like little words, and I really like that. I like that you can't kind of super make out everything that it's saying, but I do like that it's just that extra script, that extra little bit in the background. Now I'm going to trim it down a little bit. I didn't need this quite as wide as I had done it, and I always do that so that I'm able to kind of trim off any bad bits that happen around the sides, any that didn't go quite as planned. And then I have some Hero Arts Infinity circle dies. These were actually already die cut. I have some circles and in some plain white cardstock, and then I have some circles in the same vellum, the Lawn Fawn vellum, and I just store these all in the back of that little clamshell there so that when I next come to doing any die cutting, if I already have what I need, it saves me a little job. And then I have this one here. This is a new one that I got recently, and I really love this stamp set. This is the Spotlight Sayings 1 from Pink and Main, and I guess it is fun when I get a new sentiment stamp set because I use them so much, and I want all of the stamp sets that I have are usually pretty versatile. I want there to be a really wide range, although in saying that, I have the All the Birthdays one. I think it's a Concord and 9th one. That one is obviously just birthdays, but that's because I use birthdays so much. But yeah, I really do love a good versatile stamp set that has a good range in it for all occasions, and this one hits the mark there. So I have embossed this. I stamped it with some VersaFine Onyx black ink, and even though this is on vellum, the print is kind of bold enough that I'm able to put some double-sided adhesive down on the back, and you are not going to see through it at all. Now you could definitely skip the vellum step here. It's kind of a little bit hard to see on camera the effect that it gives, but I like that it's just that extra little layer, and the edges are kind of free there so you can see that it's a different layer. And then I'm going to start putting this all together, but this is where I was having a wee moment of which one I actually wanted to choose. I really like both of these. I like how they turned out, and I like the kind of soft watercolor look for both of them. So I decided to go with this one and trim it down a little bit, but either would have worked absolutely perfect. I'm going to trim this down so that it ends up measuring 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches, and then it will give a nice little border all around the outside there. Then for my little piece of scripty vellum, I am just going to add a little piece at the top, and then the middle, which will be covered, and then the very bottom, and this way I can pop the ends that will go around the back of my front panel here, and then that middle bit that just keeps it from bowing is why I like to have that little middle piece of double-sided tape in the middle. And then this sentiment is going to cover up that little piece of adhesive. I'm going to pop this up on some foam tape just to give it a little bit of dimension, because the card is relatively flat as is, relatively non-dimensional. And then add this with a little bit of liquid glue. This is the Ranger Multi-Medium in the matte finish. That's what's inside the glue bottles. Pop this down on my 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card base, and then in fact I think this is actually a 4 by 5 1/4. I think that's what I trimmed down the card front panel to, and then pop on my little sentiment straight on the middle. And I like that little bit of vellum. It gives it an extra little bit of interest to help the sentiment kind of pop out, and it gives an extra little bit of interest to the card, but it doesn't completely cover the design at all or the colors. So it's just a really nice subtle little watercolor card, and I hope that you have enjoyed this technique. If you end up giving this a go, then please post some photos to our Facebook group, Come Crafting with Natasha. There's a link to that down below too. And I hope you have enjoyed seeing the process of making the plastic bag printmaking on our cards today. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye!